Britain's leading dental body have not minced their words. They've warned of real horrors that belong in the Victorian era if the government don't do more to improve access to NHS dentists.
New figures released today by the British Dental Association really lay bare the state of UK dentistry, with an estimated 2.2 million people awaiting urgent care in England. And it's a similar picture in Scotland, where an investigation by the Scottish Liberal Democrats found 4 in 10 adults registered with a dentist have not seen one in 2 years.
And this in 2025 in the UK. One man who's had issues with NHS dentistry, and boy, is that an understatement, is a Scottish student, Nick Whelan. Now, Nick was forced to attend A&E, where he was diagnosed with septic shock after the infection from his tooth had spread to his throat and then to his heart. And astonishingly, after his ordeal, which included being put into an induced coma for 8 days, he still can't get a dentist's appointment in his local area after all he's been through. Well, he's here now alongside Eddie Crouch, the chair of the British Dental Association. Nick, I guess the phrase dying to see a dentist, in your case, was like the literal truth. I mean, you very nearly croaked.
Yeah, absolutely. There were various stages where I was kind of told that the procedures they were doing on me were kind of, let's see what happens here, you know, and
well, life-saving procedures.
Sorry.
Life-saving procedures.
Absolutely, yeah, numerous of them, yeah. And went on for various, for quite a few weeks, yeah.
So it started with a pain in your tooth.
That's correct.
And you thought, ow, I need to get this sorted.
Yeah.
And then it got worse and worse. I mean, how bad did it get before it became life-threatening? And what did you try to see somebody?
I mean, it began just as a kind of ordinary tooth infection, a hole in my tooth. But as time progressed, the pain went from just when I was biting down to constant. And it was just unbearable. I mean, physically and mentally unbearable for weeks. And so kind of efforts to get appointments were difficult. And even once getting appointments, they were so limited in the care they could provide that the problem had to continue.
So at one point you got antibiotics, didn't you?
That's
which
correct, yeah.
nipped the infection to a certain extent. But of course, as we know, I've had tooth abscess before. You take the antibiotics. If it works, the pain subsides a bit. But it doesn't mean the infection's gone, and that's the danger, isn't it?
Yeah, so ultimately what would have needed to happen was a tooth either had to come out or I needed root canal treatment. And so at the time, the chain of referrals had broken down, and it was exceptionally difficult to really get seen at any point unless it was an emergency. For myself, it didn't become an emergency really until it was too late.
Well, can you describe that to us? I said that it spread to your throat and then to your heart. What were the symptoms of that?
Yeah.
So, you know, no doubt most people have had a tooth infection, but as it began to take hold, I began to get swelling underneath my neck, felt like quite a lot of pressure on my throat, difficulty swallowing, I had pressure on my chest, kind of almost like I had some kind of chest infection, with difficulty breathing. And then ultimately the hot and cold sweats began to kick in, but the alarm bells really started ringing where I couldn't swallow anymore. And
this is sepsis, and sepsis, we know sepsis kills, and it kills fast.
Sepsis is, I believe, still the biggest killer in the world.
Absolutely right, yeah. Well, anyway, you finally got to hospital. As we said, you were put into it was that bad. You were in an induced coma for 8 days, you know, and then he came around, and it was sorted. And as I said in the introduction, you still can't get to see a goddamn dentist.
Well, effectively, to get the care required, I need to go private. But the issue absolutely still persists, and the kind of systemic problems and on the ground are still absolutely there. And I hear stories from various friends, family members, that nothing has changed for years.
No.
Eddie Crouch, what is going on?
Well, it's not the first time that we...
I was going to say, we replay
it really isn't, is it?
You know, I think the last time I was here, we were talking about these 700,000 appointments. It was part of the manifesto pledge for Labour. They promised to actually fund that extra 700,000. They're now delivering from the 1st of April, 8 months into their tenure. We can see from the figures, really, that isn't really going to solve the problem. What we need is some radical action to actually solve the problem. I mean, it's awful hearing stories like Nick's, but sadly, my colleagues are seeing these type of problems in hospital all the time. You know, we need to solve the access problem for 30 million people out there.
If you were sitting opposite the Prime Minister, and if the Prime Minister said to you, Mr Crouch, tell me what to do, and I'll do it, what would you tell him to do?
Well, you know, I'd love the opportunity. We met Stephen Kinnock in November. We're meeting him again. He's the minister responsible for dentistry. We're meeting him again in a few weeks' time. We need you know, they're making lots and lots of nice promises, but we need urgency. And sadly, you know, we need investment from the Treasury. We know the situation with the finances of the country are not great. If we can't afford a comprehensive dental service, then we have to talk about what service we can provide to stop people like Nick getting the problems that he's getting.
Because that's one of the things that Nick's cases highlight, isn't it? It's miserable having toothache. There's no doubt about that. People hate it. But people often forget that it can also be life-threatening, as serious as any other trip to A&E might involve. And I wonder, I've never been able to get appointments, NHS appointments for my children even, in the area where I've lived. But my son did fall off a slide, knocked his tooth out and was at risk. We went to A&E and that was the moment when they tackled the teeth. It's a wonder more people in this situation aren't clogging up A&Es, isn't it?
Well, sadly they are, but that, you know, most A&Es are not the appropriate place to actually treat some of the problems.
But if you're getting to a point where you're about to get sepsis, which is very often not easy to spot for the individual that's got it, you know, people will just think, I don't want to risk this, won't they? I mean, were you tempted, Nick?
I mean, I've heard stories of people doing their own work on themselves and and I can absolutely believe that the pain would drive them to do that. But yeah, no,
you didn't think, I can't take this anymore, I'm going to the dentist, until it became that medical?
Well, I mean, I had been trying, but again, as somebody, I've never really been unwell before. I'm young and healthy, and so it really isn't something you expect. I mean, as routine in my mind, anyways, as dental care is, I'd never have expected it to go so far.
And what state of health are you in now? I mean, has it had any lingering effects on you?
I mean, look, physically, I've been very lucky to recover. I think a lot of people from septicemia have long-term physical issues, and psychologically, I think the trauma is something I'm going to have to live with every day, and my parents, my family members, and my friends are all going to have to live with those memories as a result of that.
Which is dreadful. So, were you tempted to go back to the dentist who couldn't treat you and say, look where this has left me? Pretty mean on that dentist, but, you know, it feels like something needs to be done on an emotional level as well as practical, doesn't it? You're nodding, Eddie.
Yeah, and actually many of my colleagues are providing that sort of treatment at a loss in their surgeries at the moment, simply because they don't want people ending up in hospital.
Can we just bring this to a close by wishing you the very best for the future?
Absolutely.
And all we can do at the moment is cross our fingers that we get some kind of proper action.